The wind whispered secrets through the tall grass as Sarah clutched her newborn close. Little Beth, barely a week old, slept soundly, oblivious to the turmoil swirling around them. Sarah's face, though young, was etched with worry lines beyond her years. Her eyes, usually bright and full of laughter, were now clouded with a deep sadness, a hint of fear flickering within their depths. The Bar W Ranch, usually a place of bustling activity and rough camaraderie, felt cold and hostile. The smell of wood smoke from the cookhouse usually brought a sense of comfort. Now it was a harsh reminder of a life she was about to lose. Sarah adjusted the worn shawl around Beth, trying to shield her from the biting wind that swept across the plains. She glanced nervously towards the main house, a sprawling structure that symbolized the iron grip of Jedediah Walker, the ranch owner and a man known for his unyielding principles. He was a hard man, fair in his own way, but utterly unforgiving when it came to matters of morality. Sarah had tried to be discreet, to hide her secret as long as possible. But secrets like tumbleweeds have a way of being blown into the open. Now, she felt like a cornered animal, her heart pounding in her chest, awaiting the inevitable storm. She thought of the other ranch hands, most of whom had been kind to her. Would they stand up for her, or would they turn a blind eye, fearing Jedediah's wrath? The answer, she suspected, was the latter. Loyalty to Jedediah ran deep, ingrained over years of hard work and shared hardships. A single tear traced a path down Sarah's cheek, freezing in the cold air. She knew what was coming. She could feel it in her bones. The life she had known was about to be ripped away, leaving her with nothing but a baby in her arms and a vast, unforgiving wilderness ahead. Her only hope was that she could find a way to protect Beth, to give her a chance at a better life, even if it meant facing the world alone. The heavy oak door of the main house creaked open, and Jedediah Walker emerged, his face like thunder. He was a large man, his presence amplified by the years of hard work and unwavering authority. His gaze swept over the ranch yard, finally settling on Sarah, who stood frozen near the stables. "Sarah," he called, his voice a low rumble that carried across the open space. "I need to speak with you, in private." Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. This was it. She clutched Beth even tighter, finding a strange sense of courage in the warmth of her baby's small body. She nodded slowly and began to walk towards him, each step feeling like an eternity. Jedediah led her into his study, a dimly lit room filled with the scent of leather and old books. He gestured for her to sit, but Sarah remained standing, feeling too nervous to take the offered seat. "I've heard rumors," Jedediah began, his eyes fixed on her. "Rumors about the baby, about who the father is." Sarah's face paled. She knew denial was futile. The truth was written all over her. "Is it true, Sarah?" Jedediah pressed, his voice hardening. "Is the father not who you claimed?" Sarah lowered her gaze, unable to meet his piercing stare. "It's true," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The father, he was a traveler. He was only here for a short time." Jedediah's face contorted in anger. "A traveler? A drifter? And you let him, you dishonored yourself and this ranch." He slammed his fist on the desk, making Sarah jump. "I took you in when you had nowhere else to go. I gave you a home, and this is how you repay me." The truth stung. Jedediah had indeed given her a chance when she was down on her luck. Now, she had betrayed his trust, and the consequences were about to be dire. The secret was out, and now Jedediah knew that the baby's father was not the respectable ranch hand she had led him to believe. "I cannot abide such looseness on my ranch," Jedediah roared, his face turning a shade of red that matched the setting sun. "You have brought shame upon this household, and I will not tolerate it." Sarah's eyes welled up with tears. "Please, Jedediah, I beg you," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Have mercy. I have nowhere else to go. It's winter, and I have a baby to care for." Jedediah remained unmoved. "Mercy? You showed no mercy when you... He couldn't even bring himself to say the words. "You knew the rules of this ranch. You knew the consequences. But Beth is innocent, Sarah cried, holding her baby closer. She deserves a chance. Please, don't punish her for my mistakes. Jedediah turned away, his back to Sarah. You leave me no choice. You must leave the bar, W. I will not have my reputation tarnished by your indiscretion. But where will I go? Sarah asked, desperation creeping into her voice. The nearest town is days away, and the snow is already falling. Jedediah remained silent for a moment, his internal struggle evident in the tightening of his jaw. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold and unwavering. I will give you a horse and enough supplies to reach the town of Redemption, but you must be gone by morning. If you are still here when the sun rises, I will have you escorted off the property with nothing. Sarah's heart sank. Redemption was a rough town, known for its saloons and outlaws. It was no place to raise a baby, but she had no choice. It was either face the harsh winter alone or brave the dangers of Redemption. Please, Jedediah, reconsider, she begged one last time. Just give me a little more time. Let me find a place to go before you send me out into the cold. Jedediah shook his head, his decision final. You have until sunrise, Sarah, not a moment longer. He turned and walked out of the study, leaving Sarah alone with her tears and her despair. She was banished. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and gray, a stark contrast to the despair that filled Sarah's heart. She had spent the night packing a few meager belongings, her hands numb with cold and exhaustion. The horse Jedediah had provided was a sturdy mare named Betsy, but Betsy was old, and the journey to Redemption would be arduous. Sarah wrapped Beth in every blanket she could find, creating a cocoon of warmth against the biting wind. She checked the supplies Jedediah had grudgingly provided: a sack of flour, some dried meat, a small bag of beans, and a water skin. It wouldn't be enough to last long, but it was better than nothing. As she led Betsy out of the stable, she saw a few of the ranch hands watching her from a distance. Their faces were etched with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. No one dared to approach her, fearing Jedediah's disapproval. Sarah mounted Betsy, her movements stiff and awkward. She looked back at the Bar W Ranch, a place that had once been her sanctuary, now a symbol of her shame. A single tear rolled down her cheek, freezing on her skin. She urged Betsy forward, and the mare plodded slowly across the frozen ground. The vast, snow-covered plains stretched before her, an endless expanse of white that seemed to swallow her whole. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, and the temperature dropped with each passing hour. Sarah knew the journey would be treacherous. The snow was deep in places, making it difficult for Betsy to navigate. The threat of wolves and other predators was ever present. And the cold was relentless, seeping into her bones, threatening to steal her strength and her will to survive. But Sarah pressed on, driven by the fierce determination to protect her baby. She would face the wilderness, the cold, and the unknown, all for the sake of Beth. She had to. Beth was all she had left. Her journey had begun, a desperate flight for survival in a land that offered no mercy. Days blurred into a monotonous cycle of cold, hunger, and exhaustion. Sarah rationed their meager supplies, knowing they had to last as long as possible. She melted snow for water, careful to keep Beth hydrated. She sang lullabies to keep her spirits up, her voice cracking with fatigue. Betsy, bless her old heart, trudged on, her breath misting in the frigid air. But even Betsy was starting to show signs of weariness. Her gait was slower, her head hung lower. Sarah worried about pushing her too hard, but they had no choice. They had to keep moving. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows across the snow-covered landscape, Sarah spotted a flicker of light in the distance. Hope surged through her veins. It could be a cabin, a homestead, anything that offered shelter from the relentless cold. She urged Betsy towards the light, her heart pounding with anticipation. As they drew closer, she could make out the faint outline of a small cabin, smoke curling lazily from its chimney. It was a welcome sight, a beacon of hope in the vast wilderness. But as she approached the cabin, A sense of unease washed over her. The cabin seemed deserted, eerily quiet. There were no signs of life, no footprints in the snow. She hesitated, unsure whether to approach. She knew the risks of seeking shelter with strangers, especially in a place like this. But the cold was getting to Beth, and Sarah was running out of options. She had to take the chance. With a deep breath, she dismounted Betsy and cautiously approached the cabin. She called out, her voice trembling in the cold air. "Hello, is anyone there?" Silence. She called out again, louder this time. "Hello, we need help. We're just passing through." Still, no response. Sarah reached for the cabin door, her hand shaking. She pushed it open slowly, peering into the darkness beyond. What she saw inside would change everything. The cabin wasn't empty. A man sat by the fire, his back to the door. He was tall and lean, his shoulders broad despite the weariness evident in his posture. A rifle lay across his lap, and a wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge her presence. "Hello," Sarah said again, her voice barely a whisper. The man slowly turned, his eyes piercing through the dim light. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much, someone haunted by a past they couldn't escape. His face was weathered and lined, a testament to a life lived outdoors, a life lived hard. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice rough like gravel. "My name is Sarah," she replied, clutching Beth tighter. "And this is my baby, Beth. We're just passing through. We're lost and cold, and we need shelter." The man's gaze softened slightly as he looked at Beth. He seemed to hesitate, as if weighing his options. "This is my cabin," he said finally. "I don't usually have visitors." "Understand," Sarah said quickly. "We don't want to impose. We just need a place to rest for the night. We'll be gone by morning." The man studied her for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. Sarah tried to meet his gaze, to convey her sincerity, her desperation. Finally, he nodded slowly. "You can stay," he said, his voice still gruff but a little less hostile. "But just for the night. And don't expect any favors from me." Sarah breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you so much." The man, who Sarah would soon learn was named Caleb, remained seated by the fire, watching her with a wary eye. He was a mystery, a man shrouded in secrets. Sarah sensed a deep sadness within him, a pain that mirrored her own. She wondered what had brought him to this isolated cabin, what demons he was trying to outrun. She only knew that he was her only hope. Caleb watched Sarah from across the small cabin, his eyes narrowed. He kept his distance, his movements economical, his words few. He offered her a corner of the room near the fire, but he didn't offer any conversation. He seemed determined to remain detached, a silent observer in his own home. He busied himself with chores, sharpening his knife, tending to the fire, anything to avoid direct interaction. He had learned long ago that getting involved with others only led to trouble, to heartache. He preferred his solitude, his quiet life in the wilderness. But as the night wore on, and he watched Sarah tend to Beth, something began to shift within him. He saw the weariness in her eyes, the determination in her every move. He heard the soft lullabies she sang to her baby, the gentle way she cradled her in her arms. He couldn't help but notice how thin she was, how little she ate. He remembered a time when he had someone to protect, someone who depended on him. A pang of regret, a sharp stab of guilt, pierced through his hardened exterior. He tried to ignore it, to push it away, but the image of Sarah and Beth kept nagging at him. He found himself unconsciously doing small things to help. He added more wood to the fire, ensuring they stayed warm. He offered Sarah some of his own meager rations, pretending he wasn't hungry. He even caught himself smiling faintly when Beth gurgled and reached for him. He fought against his growing compassion, reminding himself that he couldn't afford to care. Caring meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. But despite his best efforts, he couldn't deny the softening in his heart, the stirring of something he thought he had lost forever. The ice around his heart was starting to melt. The next morning, Sarah prepared to leave, thanking Caleb for his hospitality. As she gathered her belongings, Caleb found himself hesitating. He knew she wouldn't survive long on her own. He knew he should let her go, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Something had changed inside him, something he couldn't explain. As Sarah prepared to leave, she swayed on her feet, her face pale and clammy. She reached out to steady herself, but her legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed onto the floor. Beth cried out in alarm. Caleb rushed to her side, his initial reluctance forgotten. He knelt beside Sarah, his hand gently touching her forehead. She was burning with fever. Exhaustion and exposure had finally taken their toll. "Sarah, Sarah, can you hear me?" he said, his voice laced with concern. Sarah groaned, her eyes fluttering open. I don't feel so good," she whispered, her voice weak. Caleb quickly assessed the situation. She was in no condition to travel. If he let her leave, she would surely die. He looked at Beth, her small face tear-streaked with fear. He couldn't let that happen. He knew helping Sarah would be risky. It would mean abandoning his solitary life, opening himself up to the possibility of pain and heartbreak. It would mean facing his own demons, confronting a past he had tried so hard to bury. But he couldn't turn his back on her. He couldn't let her die. Something inside him had changed. Something had awakened. He was no longer the detached, emotionless drifter he had once been. He was a man with a purpose, a man with a responsibility. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice firm. "You're staying here. I'm going to take care of you." He carefully lifted Sarah into his arms, carrying her to his bed. He covered her with blankets, trying to keep her warm. He then turned his attention to Beth, soothing her cries and feeding her some warmed milk. He knew he had made a decision that would change his life forever. He had chosen to help Sarah, to put himself at risk for someone else. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he had done the right thing. He would protect them both, no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks as Caleb nursed Sarah back to health. He tended to her fever, feeding her broth and keeping her warm. He cared for Beth, changing her nappies and singing her lullabies, his gruff voice surprisingly gentle. Slowly, Sarah began to recover, her strength returning little by little. As she regained her health, she began to notice things about Caleb that she hadn't seen before. The way he moved with a quiet confidence, the way he handled his rifle with practiced ease, the way his eyes would cloud over with sadness when he thought no one was watching. She noticed a small, faded photograph tucked inside his worn leather wallet. It was a picture of a young woman with bright eyes and a warm smile. Sarah didn't ask about it, but she sensed it held a deep significance for Caleb. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Sarah finally broke the silence. "Thank you, Caleb," she said softly, "for everything. You saved our lives." Caleb shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "You would have done the same for me," he mumbled. "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to be as selfless as you are." Caleb finally looked at her, his eyes filled with a hint of pain. "Selfless?" he scoffed. "I'm far from selfless. I've done things I'm not proud of." "Everyone makes mistakes, Caleb," Sarah said gently. "It's what you do after that matters." Caleb remained silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I lost someone once," he said. "Someone I loved, and I failed to protect her." Sarah reached out and gently touched his hand. "I'm so sorry, Caleb," she said. He looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "That's why I live out here," he said. "To escape the memories, to escape the pain." He paused, then added, "But you and Beth, you've made me realize that I can't run forever." The pieces of Caleb's past were slowly beginning to come together. As Sarah regained her strength, she felt compelled to share her story with Caleb. She told him about Jedediah, the Bar W Ranch, and the circumstances of her banishment. She spoke of the traveler, the father of her child, a man she had known only briefly, but who had left an indelible mark on her life. She explained how she had tried to hide her pregnancy, fearing Jedediah's wrath, and how her secret had eventually been discovered. Caleb listened intently, his expression grave. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge. He simply listened, offering her a safe space to unburden herself. "Jedediah is a hard man," Sarah said, her voice trembling with emotion. He believes in right and wrong, and there's no room for forgiveness in his world. He saw me as a disgrace, a stain on his ranch. He had no right to treat you that way, Caleb said, his voice hardening with anger. No one has the right to judge you for your past. Sarah looked at him, surprised by the intensity of his reaction. It's not just about me, she said. It's about Beth. Jedediah sees her as a mistake, a symbol of my indiscretion. Caleb reached out and gently stroked Beth's cheek, his eyes filled with tenderness. Beth is innocent, he said. She deserves a chance at a good life, just like anyone else. As Sarah finished her story, Caleb's empathy deepened. He saw in her strength and resilience he admired, a determination to protect her child against all odds. He felt a protective instinct stirring within him, a desire to shield her from the harsh realities of the world. He realized that Sarah and Beth had become more than just strangers seeking shelter. They had become his responsibility, his purpose. He would do everything in his power to help them, to give them the life they deserved. He was no longer running from his past. He was running toward a future with Sarah and Beth. With each passing day, the bond between Sarah and Caleb deepened. They worked together to face the challenges of survival, their individual strengths complementing each other. Sarah, with her nurturing nature and unwavering optimism, brought warmth and light to Caleb's secluded life. Caleb, with his rugged skills and quiet determination, provided a sense of security and protection that Sarah had long yearned for. They shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments of companionship. They learned to rely on each other, to trust each other. They found solace in each other's presence, a sense of belonging they had both been missing for so long. As they worked side by side, chopping wood, preparing meals, and caring for Beth, their eyes would often meet, lingering for a moment longer than necessary. A spark of attraction flickered between them, a silent acknowledgement of the growing feelings that were blossoming in their hearts. Caleb found himself drawn to Sarah's kindness, her strength, her unwavering devotion to Beth. He admired her resilience, her ability to find joy even in the face of adversity. He found himself wanting to protect her, to cherish her, to make her happy. Sarah, in turn, found herself drawn to Caleb's quiet strength, his unwavering loyalty, his hidden tenderness. She admired his courage, his willingness to face his past, his newfound determination to embrace the future. She found herself wanting to heal his wounds, to ease his pain, to love him with all her heart. But both were hesitant to act on their feelings, fearing rejection, fearing the disruption of their newfound peace. They had both been hurt in the past, and they were wary of opening themselves up to the possibility of pain again. Yet, despite their reservations, the attraction between them was undeniable, a silent undercurrent that flowed beneath the surface of their everyday lives. The possibility of a romantic connection hung in the air, a tantalizing promise of a love that could heal their wounds and give them a second chance at happiness. It was a slow burn, but it was definitely there. Back at the Bar W Ranch, Jedediah Walker wrestled with his conscience. He had banished Sarah, believing he was doing what was right, but the memory of her tear-streaked face haunted him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had been too harsh, too unforgiving. Weeks passed, and Jedediah heard whispers among the ranch hands. Rumors that Sarah had been seen, not in redemption, but in the opposite direction, heading towards the mountains. Rumors that she was alive and well, and that she was being sheltered by someone. That drifter who lives in that old cabin. Hank nodded again. That's the one. They say he's been taking care of her and the baby. Jedediah slammed his fist on the desk, his anger flaring. I gave her a chance to start over. I gave her supplies. She defied me, and now she's hiding with that outcast. He paced back and forth, his mind racing. He couldn't allow Sarah to defy him, to undermine his authority. He couldn't allow her to tarnish the reputation of the Bar W Ranch. He had to bring her back, to face his justice. Hank, he said, his voice cold and unwavering. Got it up, bossy. I want you to find Sarah and bring her back here. And bring that Caleb Johnson with her. I'll decide what to do with them. Hank hesitated, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Jedediah, are you sure about this? Caleb Johnson is a dangerous man. And Sarah, just do it, Hank." Jedediah snapped. "I will not be disobeyed. Find them and bring them back. That's an order." The hunt had begun. Caleb was skinning a rabbit outside the cabin when he saw them. Four riders silhouetted against the setting sun, their faces grim and determined. He recognized Hank, Jedediah's foreman, leading the pack. "Sarah," Caleb shouted, grabbing his rifle. "They're here." Jedediah sent them. Sarah rushed out of the cabin, her eyes wide with fear. She grabbed Beth and ran back inside, her heart pounding in her chest. "We have to go," Caleb said, his voice urgent. "They'll take you back to the Bar W. I won't let that happen." He quickly gathered their meager belongings, stuffing them into saddlebags. He saddled up his horse, a swift and sure-footed Mustang named Ghost, and helped Sarah mount behind him, cradling Beth in her arms. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Caleb said grimly. "Somewhere Jedediah can't reach us. Somewhere we can start over." They rode hard through the night, the wind whipping through their hair, the hooves of Ghost pounding against the frozen ground. They left the cabin behind, their sanctuary, their haven. They were fugitives now, running from Jedediah's wrath, their future uncertain. Caleb knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. He knew the odds were stacked against them, but he was determined to protect Sarah and Beth, to keep them safe from harm. He would use all his skills, all his knowledge of the wilderness, to evade Jedediah's posse. They sought refuge in the dense forests, traversing treacherous mountain passes and fording icy rivers. They lived off the land, hunting for food and finding shelter in caves and abandoned mines. They were constantly on the move, never staying in one place for too long. Their journey was fraught with danger and hardship, but their bond grew stronger with each passing day. They relied on each other, trusted each other, loved each other. They were a family now, bound together by adversity, their hope for a better future fueling their determination to survive. But Jedediah's men were relentless, and Caleb knew it was only a matter of time before they caught up. They were cornered. Caleb and Sarah found themselves trapped in a narrow canyon, the posse blocking their only escape route. He had hoped to outrun them, but Ghost was tired, and the canyon offered little room to maneuver. "Caleb Johnson!" Hank shouted, his voice echoing through the canyon. "We know you're in there. Come out with Sarah, and we promise you'll be treated fairly." Caleb knew better than to trust Hank's promises. He had seen the look in Jedediah's eyes, the cold determination to bring Sarah back, to punish her for her perceived transgressions. He wouldn't let that happen. "Stay here, Sarah," Caleb said, handing her his rifle. "Keep Beth safe. I'll handle this." "But Caleb," Sarah protested, her eyes filled with fear. "Trust me," Caleb said, his voice firm. "I'll be back." He dismounted Ghost and walked slowly towards the posse, his hands raised in the air. He appeared unarmed, vulnerable, but his eyes were sharp, his senses alert. He was a predator, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. "We don't want any trouble, Caleb," Hank said, his voice cautious. "Just hand over Sarah, and we'll let you go." "Sarah is not your property to claim," Caleb said, his voice calm and steady. "She's a free woman, and she deserves to make her own choices." "Jedediah wants her back," Hank said, "and we're going to bring her back, one way or another." Caleb knew that words were useless. He had to act. With lightning-fast speed, he drew a hidden knife from his boot and hurled it at Hank, striking him in the arm. The posse erupted in chaos, firing their rifles at Caleb. He dodged and weaved, his movements fluid and graceful like a dancer. He used the rocks and shadows to his advantage, picking off the posse members one by one. He was a force to be reckoned with, a skilled fighter, a deadly marksman. He surprised them with his knowledge of the land, his ability to disappear into the shadows. He was protecting Sarah and Beth, and he would fight to the death to keep them safe. It was a side of Caleb that Sarah had never seen before, a glimpse into the darkness he had tried so hard to bury. They had managed to escape the canyon, but Caleb knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Jedediah would not give up. He would hunt them to the ends of the earth. They needed a permanent solution, something that would protect Sarah and Beth from Jedediah's judgment and give them a chance at normal life. They found shelter in an abandoned prospector's shack, a small, dilapidated structure that offered little comfort but provided a temporary refuge from the elements. As Sarah tended to Beth, Caleb paced back and forth, his mind racing. "There has to be a way," he muttered, more to himself than to Sarah. "A way to stop Jedediah, to protect you both." Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with worry. "I don't know, Caleb," she said. "He's a powerful man. I don't think we can ever truly escape him." Caleb stopped pacing and knelt before her, taking her hand in his. "I won't let him take you," he said, his voice firm. "I promise you. I won't let him hurt you or Beth." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I have an idea," he said. "It's a long shot, but might work." "What is it?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I could give you my name," Caleb said, his voice hesitant. "We could pretend to be married. That would give you and Beth protection, respectability. Jedediah couldn't touch you then." Sarah stared at him, her eyes wide with surprise, searching his face for any sign of deception. She saw only sincerity, only a deep-seated desire to help her and Beth. She understood the enormity of his offer, the sacrifice he was willing to make. "Caleb," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "Are you sure? This is a big decision. It would change your life forever." "I know," Caleb said, squeezing her hand gently. "But I'm not afraid. You and Beth have already changed my life. You've given me a reason to care again, a reason to fight." He paused, his eyes locking with hers. "Besides," he added, a faint smile playing on his lips, "I'm starting to think I wouldn't mind being married to you." Sarah's heart fluttered at his words. She had grown to care deeply for Caleb, to admire his strength, his kindness, his unwavering loyalty. She had even allowed herself to dream of a future with him, a future filled with love and happiness. But she had always dismissed those dreams as foolish fantasies, knowing that Caleb was a man of the wilderness, a loner who valued his solitude above all else. She never thought he would be willing to give up his freedom, to commit himself to her and Beth. I don't know what to say," Sarah stammered, her cheeks flushed with warmth. "Say yes," Caleb said, his voice pleading. "Say you'll be my wife. Let me protect you. Let me give you and Beth the life you deserve." Sarah looked at Beth, sleeping peacefully in her arms. She thought of Jedediah, his unforgiving judgment, his relentless pursuit. She knew that Caleb's offer was their only hope. But more than that, she knew that she loved him. She loved his strength, his kindness, his unwavering devotion. She trusted him with her life, with her heart. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, Caleb, I'll marry you." A wave of relief washed over Caleb's face. He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that lit up his eyes. He leaned in and gently kissed Sarah, a tender, passionate kiss that sealed their fate. They were a family now, bound together by love, by necessity, by a shared hope for a better future. But the journey ahead would be long and difficult, and they knew that Jedediah was still out there, waiting to strike. Weeks later, Caleb and Sarah rode towards the Bar W Ranch, a sense of trepidation mixed with determination filling their hearts. They knew they were walking into the lion's den, but they had no other choice. They had to confront Jedediah, to show him that they were not afraid, that they were a family now, bound together by love and commitment. As they approached the ranch, they could see the ranch hands staring at them, their faces etched with surprise and confusion. They dismounted Ghost and walked hand in hand towards the main house, Beth nestled securely in Sarah's arms. Jedediah emerged from the house, his face thunderous. He stopped in his tracks, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Sarah," he said, his voice a low growl. "What are you doing here? I told you never to return." "I've come to set things right, Jedediah," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "I've come to show you that I'm not ashamed of who I am, or of my baby." "And who is this?" Jedediah asked, his eyes narrowing as he glared at Caleb. "This is my husband," Sarah said, her voice filled with pride. "This is Caleb Johnson." Jedediah's face contorted with rage. "You married that drifter? After everything I did for you?" "Caleb is a good man, Jedediah," Sarah said. "He has given me and Beth a home, a family. He has shown me what it means to be loved." Caleb stepped forward, his eyes locking with Jedediah's. "I'm here to tell you that Sarah is my wife now," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "And I will not allow you to harass her or her child. If you have a problem with that, you have a problem with me." A tense silence hung in the air thick with animosity, and, "You think a piece of paper changes anything?" Jedediah spat, his eyes blazing with anger. "You think I'll let you waltz back in here and flaunt your sin in my face?" "It's not about the paper, Jedediah," Caleb said, his voice calm but firm. "It's about love, about commitment, about doing what's right for the people you care about. Don't preach to me about right and wrong, you outlaw." Jedediah roared. "You think I don't know about your past? You think I don't know what you did?" Caleb's face darkened, his jaw tightening. He had hoped to keep his past buried, to protect Sarah from the truth. But Jedediah had forced his hand. "I made mistakes, Jedediah," Caleb said, his voice low and dangerous. "I paid for them. I'm not the man I used to be." "You'll always be a killer, Johnson," Jedediah sneered. "A man with blood on his hands. You're not fit to be a husband, a father. And you're not fit to judge anyone," Caleb retorted, his anger simmering beneath the surface. "You hide behind your Bible and your outdated beliefs, but you're nothing but a hypocrite. You banished Sarah for making a mistake, but you're too blind to see the good in her, the strength in her, the love in her heart." He stepped closer to Jedediah, his eyes locking with his. "You talk about honor, but you have no honor. You talk about justice, but you have no justice. You're a bitter, angry old man, clinging to a past that no longer exists." Caleb's words struck a nerve, hitting Jedediah where it hurt the most. He saw a flicker of doubt in Jedediah's eyes, a glimmer of understanding. He knew he was getting through to him, challenging his authority, forcing him to confront his own demons. This was more than just a confrontation. It was a battle for Sarah's future, a battle for Jedediah's soul. The ranch hands watched the confrontation unfold, their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and apprehension. Some, like Hank, remained loyal to Jedediah, their faces grim and disapproving. Others, particularly the younger ones, seemed to sympathize with Sarah and Caleb, their eyes filled with a glimmer of hope. Martha, the cook, a kind and matronly woman who had always been fond of Sarah, stepped forward, her face etched with concern. "Jedediah," she said, her voice soft but firm, "maybe it's time to let go of the past. Maybe it's time to forgive." Her words seemed to break the tension, prompting others to voice their opinions. Some echoed Martha's sentiments, urging Jedediah to reconsider his judgment. Others remained silent, unsure of where their loyalties lay. The arrival of a stagecoach brought even more onlookers to the scene. Townsfolk, curious about the commotion, gathered around the ranch, their whispers and murmurs adding to the atmosphere of uncertainty. Among the newcomers was a traveling preacher, a man with a kind face and a gentle demeanor. He listened intently to the unfolding drama, his eyes filled with compassion. He approached Jedediah, his voice calm and soothing. "My son," he said, "I sense a great deal of pain in your heart, but pain can blind us to the truth. It can lead us to make decisions that we later regret. Perhaps it is time to open your heart to forgiveness, to compassion, to love." The preacher's words had a profound impact on the crowd. They saw the internal struggle playing out on Jedediah's face, the battle between his pride and his conscience. They realized that this was more than just a personal dispute. It was a conflict between the old ways and the new, between judgment and forgiveness, between hate and love. The community was divided, their opinions. Jedediah stood frozen, the weight of the community's gaze pressing down on him. He looked at Sarah, her face etched with hope and resilience. He looked at Beth, an innocent child who deserved a chance at a good life. He looked at Caleb, a man who had faced his demons and emerged stronger, more compassionate. He thought of his own past, of the mistakes he had made, of the pain he had caused. He thought of his wife, long gone, and the love they had shared. He wondered if she would approve of his actions, if she would condone his harsh judgment. The preacher's words echoed in his mind. Pain can blind us to the truth. He realized that he had been blinded by his own pain, his own fear, his own rigid beliefs. He had allowed his pride to cloud his judgment, to prevent him from seeing the good in Sarah, the potential for happiness in their unconventional union. He saw the doubt in the eyes of his ranch hands, the questioning looks on the faces of the townsfolk. He realized that he was losing their respect, that he was becoming a relic of the past, a symbol of intolerance and inflexibility. A wave of shame washed over him. He had always prided himself on being a fair and just man. But he had failed Sarah, he had failed Beth, he had failed his community. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, and made a decision. He couldn't undo the past, but he could change the future. He could choose forgiveness over judgment, love over hate, compassion over pride. He opened his eyes, his gaze softening as he looked at Sarah and Caleb. He saw the love in their eyes, the strength in their commitment. He knew that they were not a threat, but a family deserving of love and respect. He stepped forward, his voice softer, more subdued. "Sarah," he said, his eyes filled with regret. "I was wrong. I let my pride blind me. I'm sorry." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. She had never expected to hear those words from Jedediah, a man known for his unyielding nature. "I can't undo what I did," Jedediah continued, "but I can offer you my forgiveness, and I can offer you a home. If you're willing to stay, you and Caleb, you're welcome to live here on the Bar W Ranch." A collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. The tension that had hung in the air dissipated, replaced by a sense of hope and reconciliation. Sarah smiled, tears